You're listening to the RFP Success Show with 8-time author, speaker, and CEO of the RFP Success Company, Lisa Rehurek. Tune in each episode to learn what today's capture and RFP teams are doing to increase their win percentages by up to 20, 30, and even 50%, and meet the industry trailblazers that are getting it right. Let's get started.
Hello, everybody, and welcome to the RFP Success Show. I'm Lisa Rehurek, and I am your host of this show, and I'm also founder and CEO of the RFP Success Company. So we're excited to have you here today. I'm just going to be talking to you very simplistically about doing an RFP strategic review. Now, there's a lot of reviews out there. You've probably heard of the color team reviews, which is like pink, red, green, gold, blue, all of those different types of reviews. Those are, if you're in a very complex RFP environment, you're very familiar with those. They're very broken out. But this podcast episode is really for those of you who don't have that complex setup. You don't have a huge proposal team, and you're trying to figure out how to get that strategic review done so that there's somebody objectively looking at your proposal and looking at it from not just a compliance perspective, but a strategic perspective. Are you hitting all the marks? And it's something that we do here a lot at the RFP Success Company, and our clients have asked us, can you train us on this, and how do you do this? So this is going to be a very simplistic overview of how we do that and how you can implement this in your own business. But what I want to stress to you is that it can't be the person that wrote it, and it probably can't be the person that managed it, depending on the role of the proposal manager. If they're involved in the content, if they're pulling it all together, they're not the best person to do it because they can't look at it objectively. So you almost need like a third party that hasn't been super intimately involved. They understand what you're trying to accomplish. They understand the themes and all of that. So a lot of times a salesperson's a perfect person to do this, or your executive sponsor of the RFP, like who's the one that's bringing the RFP in and saying, we need to bid on this? The owner of the company, the sales director, the managing director. Again, this is for those of you who don't necessarily have formal proposal teams, although I will tell you this too, that we have people that have formal proposal teams that still don't know how to do this, and they don't do the formal color team reviews, and this also fits with that as well. Maybe it's somebody else on the team that isn't involved in that particular proposal that can come in and do the strategic review for you. But that strategic review, it's so important for so many things. When you're bidding on an RFP, you are responding to questions as they were asked, which is logical. That's human nature. They're asking me this question and I'm going to respond to it. But the deal is that everybody else is doing the same thing. And you've got to find a way to stand out and not just say, yes, we can do this. We've done this before. Because everybody else that's bidding can do this and they've done it before. And they're going to show we've got experience in this. And here's our process for it. And here's how we approach it. So all of those things are valid. All of those things need to be part of your proposal response. However, there needs to be more to it than that. You've got to grab their attention for a couple of reasons. Number one, you've got to make sure that they want to keep reading. So as boring as the RFP itself is, a lot of times, no offense to anybody out there, but the RFP responses are just as boring. And if you think about this poor evaluation team that has to review at a minimum 2, generally at a minimum there's 3, sometimes, and this is craziness, there's 40 or 30. And if you, oh my gosh, how painful is that to have to read through all of these? So what are you going to do to capture and keep their attention throughout that? And then the second thing that you want to accomplish is building trust in that document. You want to make sure that they're kind of craving working with you. Have you ever read a novel and it just keeps you engaged? It's like, oh, I want more, I want more, I want more. Now, look, I'm not going to pretend that it's like reading a really enticing novel, but what you want to do is you want to keep them engaged, like I said at the first point, and then you want to build up enough excitement that they want to keep reading, and they're like, ooh, these people are interesting. I think that I want to learn more. I want to learn more. I want to learn more. That's what you want to have in their minds. And as you're doing that, you're building trust. And it's hard to build trust in a written document, but that's a big part of your job, is to build trust. Yes, it's to tell them that you can do the job. Yes, it's to show them that you're qualified and capable. But again, everybody's going to show them that same thing. So building the trust piece becomes super important. So how do you do that? Now, I'm going to tell you the steps that we take. There are generally at least 2 people on my team that are doing a strategic review for one of our clients. So we don't even have one person doing it all. And it's hard. Again, when you're a small team, I get it. But if you can find one objective person, it's going to raise the level of your proposal so much, and it's going to stand out from the crowd because most other people out there are not doing these things. So think about how it's going to affect the outcome, because the reader is going to they're going to be more excited about your proposal. They're going to be more excited about what you can do for them, and they're going to feel that trust that you've built. So here are the 3 steps that we take when we do a strategic review. Aside from compliance, because we always do compliance, is everything there. And of course, you should always have somebody doing that compliance review. But these steps are outside of that compliance review. So the first question is, have they answered all of the questions as they were asked? And this is like a separate pass. We do this separately from everything else that we're doing, because you got to focus on that. And it sounds ridiculous because you're thinking, well, of course we answer the questions. But I will tell you 100% of the time that we've done a strategic review of past proposals or current drafts, clients have missed the boat on at least a handful of questions. You've got to look at the question and make sure, number one, that you've answered the question. Because a lot of times we get, it's a really weird phenomenon actually, but we get, I don't know if we see the question and we're not completely reading it. You know that old adage about people listen to respond, not to hear? It's the same with reading. We're reading to respond, but we're not really letting that question sink in. And it's important to think about the intent of that question. Why are they asking this question, and what do they really want to know? And then have we responded in a way that they're going to be able to look at this and say, yes, they meet these requirements, they exceed these requirements. And you almost have to put yourself in the evaluator's shoes and think about how they're going to be grading that. So when you're going through and doing that review, have you answered the question in the way that is going to make it easy for them to score you? And then the second thing is, have you addressed all of the parts of the question? And this is missed all the time. There is one question that we have that I use an example in my workshops all the time. It's like 17 different questions, I think, in one question, something ridiculous like that. I might have that number wrong, but it's crazy sometimes, especially on the overly complex and technical proposals, how many questions they cram into one question. And you've got to make sure that you address them all. Because on the evaluator's end, what they're doing is they're going through this evaluator's guide or the scoring tool that they've got, and they're checking things off. So you got to make sure that you've got everything answered in there. So number one step in a strategic review is double checking the questions and the answers, and making sure that the answers flow with what the question was and all parts of the question. So that's number one. Do that first separately. Then come back in a second time and say, okay, are we engaging the reader with the things that they're going to really care about? So partially what I just talked about, the things that they're going to score you on. And by the way, you should always be looking at the evaluation criteria when you've got it and making sure that you're taking that into consideration in your writing. In the second step of the strategic review, are you engaging the reader with the things that they really care about? So it's not just about the how and the logistics of it all, which is what we generally do almost always. And this is not necessarily a mistake per se, because again, the question is formulated in such a way that lends itself to a how to, or how we do answer, but you've got to take it deeper than that. So it's not just about the how and the logistics of it all. It's also about again, showing your authority, showing your credibility, making sure that you understand how it's going to affect them. And so there's three things underneath this second point that I want to point out. Number one, is the proposal geared towards the solution versus all about us? So if you're talking too much about the we can help. We have experience in, we've done this before. We are fantastic. We're Superman. That is how we all seem to approach RFP responses. You got to eliminate that, and you need to start talking about your solution and what's in it for the clients, how your solution is going to solve their challenge, and why you are the ones to do it. And it's not just because you have 20 years experience. It's got to go deeper than that. We understand that these are some of the pitfalls that come into play because over our 20 years experience, we've seen everything. And here are some of the key roadblocks that we've seen, and here's how we've addressed those. And that's unique to us. Those are the types of things that you want to be talking about when you're talking about you, right? So is the proposal geared toward the solution versus all about us? The second point under this second point of the strategic review is your theme clear throughout? Meaning, are you really hitting on that one value proposition that's going to help you stand out? And at the onset of your RFP response, you all should be having a strategy meeting. You should be talking about what that theme is. That theme should be based on your value proposition, on the client's hot buttons, to a huge degree your differentiators. It's got to be kind of one key theme that you're going to weave throughout your entire proposal. So that's the second part of this piece, is making sure that your theme is carried throughout, that it's mentioned numerous times, and that it's very clear. Okay. And that's that kind of, again, that statement that's going to have you stand apart from everybody else.
Back to the RFP Success Show in just a moment. But first, what's your biggest challenge regarding your RFP response process? Is it bid strategy, human resources, or maybe it's clunky and inefficient processes? The RFP Success Company works with small and medium-sized businesses to improve RFP processes, increase win rates, and provides highly experienced fractional response support. Learn more by booking a call at the rfpsuccesscompany.com/call.
And then the third piece is, are you differentiating yourself throughout the response, not just in that one way in the theme, but in other ways? And like the example that I just gave you a couple of minutes ago, when you're talking about we have 20 years of experience, well, who cares? What does that mean for me? What is your 20 years of experience going to do for me? Maybe it means that you're not, that you know what you're doing, but this guy over here has 10 years of experience. I would assume that they know what they're doing. What is the differentiator in your 20 years versus anybody else's? And it's a hard piece because businesses have a really hard time identifying this, but you have to continue to dig deeper. And the question that I always ask is, so what? Why is this important? So what, so what, so what? If you were to see one of our documents when we go through, particularly when I go through and I'm doing a review, I have a ton of those questions. Why does this matter? What's in it for them? So what, so what, so what? To you, it feels like it matters, but you've got to flip the script and make sure that it matters to them. So this step 2 in steps in a strategic review is really all about making sure that you are tying your response to what's in it for them, and that you are the best solution. But you can't just say that we're the best solution. No, you've got to prove it to them. What are you doing to prove to them that you are the ones that they should hire? So that's what we're looking at in step number 2. And then in step number 3, again, a separate read through. And I understand that this all takes time, and you've got to build the time into your timeline, by the way. And we'll talk about that here in just a minute. But the third step is readability. So was it easy to follow? Did it keep my attention? Were the paragraphs way too long? Were there processes that trailed off that didn't make any sense and could be streamlined in like a step-by-step process? Just overall readability, that the reader is going to be able to follow along and really understand what it is that you're conveying to them. So those are the 3 steps in a strategic review. Very important. Let me repeat them. Number 1, have the questions actually been answered as they were asked? Number 2, are you engaging the reader with things that they really care about? And then number 3, the readability piece, and making sure that it's easy for them to follow along and they don't get mired in too much heaviness in your response. So I also said that I was going to come back and discuss timing for this. You generally need, like, we ask for 48 to 72 hours of time to do our strategic review. Sometimes we scrunch that into 24 hours. I'm not going to lie. And sometimes, it's hard to get the clients to do this. And in the beginning, I'm going to tell you right now, it's going to be a hard thing. So pick your poison, pick one of these that you can actually get through quickly, maybe divide and conquer if you've got 3 people one person can do each one of these. But it's going to be hard to carve that time out for this type of a review. But when you do your calendar, build it into your response calendar so that it's in there and people see, look, we need time to do this review. And once you start seeing the difference that it makes in your proposal and your team starts seeing the difference it makes, they're going to get more excited to have time in order to get this review done, number 1. And number 2, hopefully then you're going to start seeing some really great results from it. And when you start seeing those wins, that's when also people start getting very excited and it just will start to come naturally. We have a really great client that we've been working with for, I would say, 2 or 3 years now. And it probably took us a good year for them to carve it out, that time out. And now their technical writers even say, hey, we need to give Lisa's team more time. We need to give them 2 or 3 days here because they need to be able to do their thing that adds so much value. So once everybody starts seeing the value in that review, things start to shift. But it's not an overnight thing. I want you to be prepared for that. It's not an overnight thing. And maybe in the beginning, you start carving 24 hours out and getting done what you can get done in that time. But pay attention to those 3 pieces. Make sure it's an objective reviewer. And I guarantee you it's going to make a big difference in your results. And then it's also going to make a big difference in your ability to formulate the proposal as you go and or train people on your team to formulate it a little bit differently and think differently, because you're going to be giving a lot of feedback. You're going to have to go back and say, okay, here's a bunch of questions that we have that we need you to dig deeper on. And so your writers, whoever's writing these things, they're going to start understanding what you're looking for, and they're going to start writing that way. Again, it's not going to happen overnight. Here's another key point that I want to say about the strategic review. Don't have it due like a day before the proposal is due. You also need to build in a buffer of 24 to 48 hours to respond, whoever is going to respond to all of those review comments that whoever the reviewer is, can't address themselves. So you've got to build that time in as well. So yes, we are now looking at maybe 3 to 5 business days. And it's funny because everybody thinks it's all about the writing. It's all about the writing. And everybody wants to give the writers the big bulk of the time. But the strategy and the reviews together, probably about 50% of the time. So that upfront strategy and that back-end review, production, delivery, all of that should be 50% of your timeline and only 50% of your timeline writing. So the reviews are so important. People think of them as a secondary, as a nice to have, but not that important. They're crucial to the success of your RFP. So make sure you're building in the time for that. All right. I think that I am done for today. Thank you all for being here. Again, I am Lisa Rehurek, your host of the RFP Success Company, and we look forward to having you back here again in the future.
This has been another episode of the RFP Success Show with Lisa Rehurek, 8-time author, speaker, and CEO of the RFP Success Company. Thank you for joining us. If you have feedback on today's episode, email us at podcast@rfpsuccess.com. No matter your business size, industry, if you have an in-house RFP team, or need outside support, the RFP Success Company helps increase RFP win ratios by 10, 20, and even 50%. Learn more at the rfpsuccesscompany.com.